The way I see it, I am a black woman. I was born black. I will die black. And being black American, that's a huge part of who I am. And my culture largely shaped who I am, especially being Gullah Geechee, being raised up by who I am. From the food to the dialect, especially, and just kind of the way that we move and love on each other. And I'm so proud of who I am, especially to learn the history of my people. That most of the enslaved Africans who came through the U.S. came through the port in Charleston, and the Gullah Geechee people were able to hold on to certain parts of West African culture, and we see that today. Even having lived in Ghana for a couple years, I see the similarities in the foods that we eat, the way we celebrate life and death, all of that stuff. And I'm always excited and happy to share that part of my culture and myself with the people who engage with my content or or find themselves as a member of my community. And I'm always just like kind of on a mission to educate people, because the world is so much bigger than the corner that we were born and raised in. And I think it's especially important that we reach out to each other as people and just kind of learn the different things that we have to offer each other. I think that obviously the most important thing that people should know about Juneteenth is the fact that it's not just a Black Independence Day. It's a celebration, but also a reminder of the fact that even though legally our people had been made free, you know, quite some time, there were still those who did not realize that they were free legally. We're still being treated and moving and living as if they were still enslaved. And I think, it's important that we celebrate those, our ancestors, of course, but also to remember that today we're really living much of the same life. Like, yes, on paper, technically, legally, we are a free people, but the work is not done. I don't think it ever will be, as long as we exist in the world as it is. So, even though it's easy to be comfortable and to be grateful for life the way it is, we have to remember that there's a lot of fine print that we don't necessarily pay attention to. We should keep that in mind in everything that we do, and we should be always intentionally moving in a way that will honor those ancestors. I think some of the conversations that should be happening around Juneteenth include those, or should include those, that are not Black Americans, including, people who are West Indian or African or even, non-Black people, because even though we tend to find ourselves in a position of having to fight long, hard, and alone for ourselves, everything that we as Black people do and have done has benefited the rest of the world, especially particularly Black Americans. So, the diaspora wars happen all the time, which I think is nonsense. But at the end of the day, there is not a corner of the world that Black American culture has not touched. And I think when it comes to the conversation of Juneteenth, yes, we finally get a day off for it some places. I definitely had to work. But, at the end of the day, I think it's important. It's more important than just having another day off on the calendar because it's listed as a federal holiday. We all should be having conversations about what got us to this point in the first place, whether you're Black American, non-Black American, European, Asian, African, South American, Latin American, any of those things, like it all matters. So I think that's a thing that people should keep in mind, as the conversations happen. So this month, I actually, I had to work, of course, because, it's just a regular day for a lot of companies still. So I didn't get the day off, but I did get to celebrate with my coworkers, which I thought was cool, at least to see the holiday being recognized and acknowledged. And it's funny because I think it's kind of uncomfortable for non-Black people still, but we were loud and proud with our celebration. But then also, I am a part of the Twitch Black Guild. So we had a big Twitch rival stream. And so I also got to connect with a lot of Black streamers, which I absolutely love, because when I started, there wasn't like very much representation for Black streamers. And now we come in droves. So, and it was just like, getting together with the homies. So I really enjoyed it. Although they had me stressed out, we played Super Battle Golf for a couple hours. It was intense, but I had a really good time. So I streamed, of course, and, my community got to come and celebrate with me as well. So that's pretty much all I did this year. Didn't get a chance to get any fireworks or anything, but I plan on doing, much bigger and better things in the future. The advice that I have for Black creators, anybody who does creation in any capacity, whether it's music, whether it's dance, whether it's visual art, content creation, public speaking, anything of this sort, remember that your power is in your blackness. You know, there is power in your blackness. And that, you know, although you have to be careful that it does not drive every moment, you know, the hard thing about being a creative as a Black person is people constantly giving you opportunities based off your struggle. Hey, how hard is it to be a Black person in content creation? Tell us about it. You know, I don't want to focus on those things all the time because, yes, it is a conversation that has to be had, but that's not a conversation that I should be at the forefront of as far as solutions. The conversation needs to be had with the people who are withholding the opportunities or in a position to give people opportunities and choose not to for whatever reasons they may have. But for those of you who are Black creators and creatives, I would just say remember your power. We are magic, and everything that we touch turns to gold. So be proud, stand proud in your Blackness, stand proud with how you identify and who you identify with. And don't let anybody dictate how you see yourself and how you move. You are especially you. So let that be your driving force. Always just embrace and love every inch and every piece of yourself and pour that into your work, because at the end of the day, you are the only thing that you will certainly and absolutely have. So just lean into that. So just a couple of the things that I think people should absolutely know about Gullah Geechee culture and history and all that stuff. The things that I like to speak on the most, especially, is that, you know, we are a real people. You know, there's like this narrative going around that Gullah Geechee people aren't like a real thing. I don't know where that came from, but I know who my ancestors are. I know where my people are from. Like I said before, you know, it's important to note that most of the people who came, most of the enslaved Africans who were brought over on the transatlantic slave trade came through the port of Charleston, and much of what we see and recognize as Gullah Geechee culture is the preservation of the original cultures of our people that managed to survive, you know, between the languages, the dances, the celebrations, the food, you know, eating okra soup or red rice, or, you know, the way we do funerals and celebrate, the way we sing and dance, you know, kumbaya, all of that stuff. It's a whole culture in itself, you know, it's a whole subculture in itself, which I am happy to see is getting a lot of attention and shine and recognition these days because, you know, growing up, it was just my cousins, them, you know, it was just my people, you know. So now, you know, we're seeing it more mainstream and more people are talking about it and all that stuff. So it's very exciting to see. But what I would like to speak on, I'll say, because this is not, even being from Charleston, this is not something that I actually got to learn about in school, but Denmark Vesey is one of the men who was enslaved as an African, and brought to Charleston, South Carolina. And Vesey, he was one of the founders of the Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston. And Denmark Vesey had planned a large slave revolt that was supposed to be like massive, but then he ended up, you know, being sold out as that happens. And, you know, he ended up being, you know, murdered after the fact. But it was his church that we saw was attacked. You know, we have the Emmanuel nine Black people from Charleston were in church for Bible study when a white supremacist, Dylan Roof, came in and murdered them. This is the very same church that Denmark Vesey co-founded, and I think a lot of people don't realize the significance of that. And then the fact that it happened almost right around Juneteenth, which I think is like the most, I won't even call it ironic because I do think that it was orchestrated in that way for that reason. But I think that's something very powerful that our people should be sure to acknowledge as we remember the Emmanuel Nine, God rest the dead, or God bless the dead. And just, you know, remember that we are a resilient people. So we should move in that way every single day.